I pressed my wet face into the worn leather of the office chair in the back of La Serena and tried to breathe through the taste of salt and cheap cleaner instead of my own panic. Crumpled napkins dug into my palms, little white knots shredded between my fingers, as if I could squeeze the fear right out of my body and into the paper. I had locked the door, turned off the overhead light, and told myself that if I kept my sobs silent, the walls would keep my secret. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's go back to hours before, where it all started. The door did not care. The handle clicked, the hinges groaned, and harsh light from the hallway slashed across the cramped room, dragging me out of the half-dark. I flinched and squeezed my eyes shut, humiliation burning hotter than the tears on my cheeks. When I forced them open again, he was there. Rocco Barisi filled the doorway like a warning. He wore black from throat to shoes, the fitted shirt pulling over his shoulders every time he moved, gold chains catching the light against his pale skin. Ink climbed his neck and spilled down his forearms in sharp black patterns, coiled over the backs of his hands. His slicked-back dark blonde hair framed a face cut from angles and eyes, those pale blue eyes flat and alert, as if he had walked in expecting an enemy, not his Waitress folded into his office chair. I poured his espresso 6 nights a week, carried plates to his private table, pretended not to hear the way men dropped their voices whenever he leaned back and steepled his tattooed fingers. In the city, his name lived in the same whispered sentences as missing people and unpaid debts. To me, he had always been the silent owner at the corner table who never raised his voice and never needed to. Tonight, the most dangerous man I knew was staring straight at me while mascara streaked down my face. For a year, I had built a careful version of myself inside his restaurant. Giada the unshaken, Giada the polite, Giada who smiled the same at tourists and gangsters, who never flinched when bruised men limped in and never asked why the same black car waited outside the back entrance every Friday. I balanced trays through arguments that smelled like gunpowder and cigar smoke, counted tips with steady hands even when rumors about Rocco's enemies floated in from the street. I told myself if I stayed useful and invisible, his world would never really touch me. Now, it was crashing through the office door with him, and the one man I had never wanted to see me fall apart was watching me do exactly that. Giada. The sound of my name and his voice punched through my chest. Rocco's tone was usually low and flat, the kind of calm that made grown men babble excuses. Tonight, there was something else under it, something roughened at the edges, and that made the tears well up again. No one said my name like that. Not my parents, always exhausted from chasing bills. Not my brother, who joked his way around everything serious. Rocco stepped into the office, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than a slammed one. The room felt smaller with him in it, the air tighter. He slid the pistol in his hand back into the holster at his hip as if it were just another piece of cutlery from the kitchen, then lowered himself into a crouch in front of my chair. Up close, I could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the tiny scar near his mouth, the way those icy eyes searched my face as if cataloging every streak and tremor. One tattooed hand came up, slow and deliberate. His fingers curled under my chin, rough skin and cold rings startling against my warm, damp cheeks, and he tipped my head up until I had no choice but to look at him. Someone in this city thought it was wise to make my waitress cry. He said quietly, "That is a very bad choice. Tell me who, and I will decide if they go under the ground or into the water." The words should have frozen my blood. They should have reminded me that this man's smile could precede a disappearance, that people lowered their eyes when he passed for a reason. Instead, something desperate and hot unfurled low in my stomach. For the first time since my phone had lit up with that nightmare video, the impossible thought slid through my mind. Maybe I did not have to carry this alone. I opened my mouth to do what had kept me alive for years. Swallow the truth, pretend everything was fine, apologize for crying while I was still on the clock. "It is nothing you need to worry about, sir." I managed, the words thin and cracked. "It is personal. I lost control for a minute, and I am sorry for bringing it into your office. It will not happen again. His fingers tightened just enough to still the tremble in my chin. The calm in his eyes sharpened, turning from concern to something colder, deeper. Personal, he repeated, and the way he said it made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. Giada Grease, in the months you have worked for me, you have never once been late. You have never dropped a plate. You have never taken money that was not yours. You have served men with blood on their shirts and never spilled a drink. You kept your head up when lesser people would have run out of this place and never come back. He tipped his head, studying me with that unblinking stare that had silenced entire rooms. You do not break down in my office over something small, so you will not tell me it is nothing. You will tell me who touched what is mine. The word mine slid over my skin like heat and ice at the same time. I felt the weight in my apron pocket as if the tiny glass vial had turned to lead, dragging my whole body down with it. Kofi's face flashed behind my eyes, wrists tied, fear stamped over his usual crooked grin. Rocco's gaze dropped for a second, following the line of my shaking hand to where it hovered unconsciously over that pocket. When his eyes met mine again, there was no softness left. I'm going to ask you once more, he said, and then I will start looking for the answer myself. The threat settled over the room like smoke. I swallowed, my throat raw, and for a heartbeat I thought I might choke on the lie I was still trying to hold. If I gave him Luca's name, there would be violence. If I stayed quiet, Kofi would die alone in that filthy room. Either way, blood was coming. My fingers clenched harder around the napkins. The leather of the chair creaked under my grip and my vision blurred, not just from fresh tears, but from the rush of memory that rose up and dragged me back. An hour earlier, the restaurant had been loud and bright and ordinary. We were closing after a long Friday. The last couple at table 12 argued over a bill while I cleared plates and pretended not to hear. The kitchen staff shouted jokes in a mix of languages, pots clanged, and the salty smell of the sea drifted in every time someone cracked the back door for a smoke. Giada, office, my manager called, waving a receipt folder in the air. Someone wants a word. I remember frowning, because Rocco never spoke to staff through anyone. If he wanted you, he crooked a finger, and that was that. Still, I wiped my hands on my apron and headed to the back, heart beating fast for reasons I could not name. The hallway seemed longer than usual. By the time I reached the office door, the dining room noise was a distant hum. The door was already ajar. A man I had never seen before leaned against the desk, as if he owned the place, his suit too sharp for anyone who actually worked in a restaurant. He smiled when he saw me. The smile never touched his eyes. Giada Grease, he said in a smooth accent that curled around the consonants. A thin snake tattoo wound out from his collar and disappeared behind his ear. You are even prettier than they said. Every instinct I had told me to turn around and walk straight out, but the door clicked shut behind me. I did not remember closing it. I think you have the wrong person, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Staff are meant to leave through the kitchen. He laughed softly and slid a phone from his pocket. You have a brother, he said. Kofi, yes. My heart stopped. The screen lit up with a video call. Kofi sat tied to a chair in a concrete room, wrists bound, ankles taped to the legs. A bruise was forming along his cheekbone. Someone off camera slapped the back of his head, and he startled, eyes wide, trying to see who held the phone. Giada, he called, voice thin with fear. Gi, I am sorry. I did not mean to. The man muted him with a lazy tap of his thumb. Luca Dragan sends his regards, he said. Your brother has been very careless around people he should not owe money to. Fortunately for him, your boss is more valuable than any debt. I cannot breathe. What do you want? I whispered. He reached into his jacket and placed a tiny glass vial on the desk. The clear liquid inside caught the office light. Tomorrow night, your owner will host a private dinner, he said. You will be working as usual. You will pour his drink, a few drops of this in his glass, and his heart will stop before dessert. My stomach rolled. And if I do not, he glanced at the frozen image of Kofi on the screen, then back at me. Then your brother's heart stops instead. Slowly, on camera. I must have said no. I must have told him I could never do that. The memory blurred at the edges, like a dream you try to hold on to after waking. What stayed sharp was the feel of the vial pressed into my palm, the chill of the glass and the heat of his fingers, and the way he leaned in close enough for me to smell his cologne. "You are not killing a saint," he murmured. "The world will thank you. Remember that when you start to cry." Then he walked out, passing my manager with a casual nod, as if he were just another supplier. I locked the office door behind him and stared at the vial until my legs gave out and I dropped into the chair. That was when the first sob tore loose. That was when the napkins started to shred. That was when I forgot to be useful and invisible. Now I was back in the present, with Rocco crouched in front of me, waiting. His question still hung between us. "Giada." His voice cut through the memories. "Look at me." I dragged my gaze up to his. Those pale eyes were patient and merciless at the same time. He would not walk out of this room without an answer. And deep down, I knew he would find it with or without my help. My fingers slipped from the ruined napkins and curled over the outline of the vial. The decision tasted like rust on my tongue. "Luka Dragan," I whispered. The name scraped out of me like a confession. "He has my brother. He sent a man here and gave me poison for your drink. If I do not use it tomorrow, they will kill Kofi." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Rocco did not blink. For a moment, he looked less like a man and more like a storm held inside a human body. "Good," he said at last, voice soft and deadly. "Now I know where to start. And Luka Dragan is not walking away from this." He released my chin and rose to his full height, already reaching for his phone, already stepping into that world of men and orders and invisible lines of power. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, but one thing was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Whatever happened next, my problem was no longer mine alone. Rocco ended the call he had started, slid his phone into his pocket, and turned back to me as if I were the only person in his world. "Stand up," he said. My legs felt like wet string, but I pushed myself out of the chair. The napkins fell from my hands to the floor. He watched my shaking fingers for a moment, then held out his palm. The vial. I swallowed. For one insane second, I thought about lying, about saying I'd already thrown it away. But his eyes were on me with that patient, deadly focus, and I knew he would search the office, the kitchen, the trash, the drains, until he found what he wanted. I reached into my apron and closed my hand around the cold glass. It clicked softly as I set it in his palm. He lifted it to the light. The clear liquid caught the glow from the desk lamp, innocent and cruel at the same time. Rocco tilted the vial, watching the way the contents moved. His face did not change, but something in his posture went tighter, shoulders drawn like a bowstring. "Imported," he said quietly. "Not from here. This leaves a very specific trail if anyone cares to look." I stared at the tiny bottle that had felt heavier than my whole body. "You know what it is. I know who likes to use it," he corrected. "Luka has been trying to step into markets that do not belong to him. This is his idea of creative negotiation." He set the vial carefully on the desk, as if he were placing evidence at a crime scene. "Start again," he said, slowly this time, "from the moment someone used my office without permission." So I told him. I told him about my manager calling me to the back, the stranger waiting inside with polished shoes and that snake ink curling up his neck. How he spoke my full name as if reading it off a file and showed me Kofi on the screen, tied to a chair. I repeated every word I could remember, my voice fading whenever I reached Kofi's apology, growing steadier when I quoted the threats. Rocco did not interrupt. He only asked a question when I stumbled. "Accent. Eastern. Like yours, but different. Sharper. Background. Concrete walls. One metal door. I could hear water, maybe pipes. Music somewhere far away. Old, like from a radio. How long did the call last? Maybe 3 minutes. My throat tightened. Long enough. I finished with the last thing the man had told me. That I was not killing a saint. That the world would thank me. That my brother's heart would stop if Rocco's did not. When the words finally ran out, my voice disappeared with them. The office felt too quiet. I waited for shouting, for a slammed fist, a shattered glass, anything that matched the storm I felt rolling under his skin. Instead, Rocco took a slow breath, lifted the vial again, and studied it like a puzzle he intended to solve. "Luka could have sent a shooter," he said. He could have tried to hit me in the street or in another place. Instead, he sends poison through you. In my restaurant. In my glass. He looked up, and there was nothing cold or flat in his stare now. It burned. He uses my waitress in my office. That is not just an attack. That is a message. He wants every pair of eyes in the city to know he can reach into La Serena. A shiver went through me. Can he? Rocco's mouth curved, but it was not a smile. He just did, he said. Once. That is all he gets. He slid his phone out again and tapped the number without looking. Nico, he said when the call connected. I'm sending you a contact. Trace it. I want location, building layout, who owns the property, and every vehicle that has been near it in the last week. You have 10 minutes to give me a district and a guess. He paused, listening, then added, and pull old files on Luca's people. Anyone with a snake on their neck. He ended the call and finally looked at me again. How old is your brother? 17. My chest squeezed around the number. He is finishing school. He should be finishing school. He is in trouble often. Not like this. The words rushed out, needing to be heard. He gets into little things, stupid things. Playing cards for money. Sneaking out when he should be studying. Nothing that should put him in front of someone like Luca. He talks big, but he is a kid. Our parents do not see how fast he is slipping, and I am always working, and I thought, if I could keep sending money, he would not feel like he had to prove anything to anyone. I stopped, realizing I was rambling, but Rocco nodded as if I were giving him a witness statement. Your parents know he is missing? I shook my head. They think he is staying with friends tonight. If I tell them now, they will panic and call the police, and Luca will know, and... The image of Kofi with a gun to his head flashed behind my eyes. I swallowed hard. So, Rocco said slowly, your brother is young, careless, tied to people who smell opportunity and fear. Your family is stretched thin. You're the one who works double shifts and sends money home. He crept up my neck. How do you know that? I watch my staff, he said simply. I know who drinks too much after hours. Who sells information. Who pockets extra cash. I also know who takes the leftovers to the kids in the alley instead of the trash, and who walks to the bus stop with their head up no matter who is on the corner. His gaze held mine. Your name came across Luca's table because you work here. Because he thinks this place is mine, and you are too soft to survive contact with his world. He expects you to break. I did break, I said, voice rough. You walked in on it. You cried, Rocco corrected. You did not pour the poison yet. The yet hung between us like smoke. He picked up the vial again, rolling it between his fingers. This is not happening. I blinked. What? You are not touching my glass with this in your hand, he said. If Luca wants to play with my life, he is going to have to put his own on the table. I believed him. Completely. It scared me more than the vial. Rocco tapped another number and lifted the phone to his ear. Send me the video, he told me quietly, covering the mouthpiece with his hand. The one with your brother. My fingers fumbled at my pocket for my own phone. I pulled up the message, the frozen image of Kofi staring at a camera with terror in his eyes, and sent it to the number he dictated. On his call, he spoke quickly in his own language, words low and clipped, then switched back to our shared tongue. Take the audio apart, he instructed whoever was on the other end. I want the echoes cleaned, background noise isolated. Give everything to Nico in 5 minutes. He ended that call too, and finally seemed to remember that I was still standing there, arms wrapped around myself like a shield. Sit, he said, nodding to the chair. I shook my head. I cannot. If I sit, I think I will not get back up. A fleeting spark of something like respect flickered behind his eyes. Fine, he said. Then listen. He moved around the desk, opened a drawer, and tucked the vial into a small metal box, locking it with a click. The key disappeared into his pocket. You are not going back to your apartment tonight, he said. You will sleep upstairs. I stared at him. Upstairs where? There is an apartment above the restaurant, he said. Small kitchen, bedroom, bath. It is not a palace, but it is secure. From tonight, until I say otherwise, that is where you stay. My heart stuttered. You want me to live here? I want to know where you are while Lucas still thinks he can move you like a piece on a board. He stepped closer, his expression leaving no room for argument. 2 men will be at the back door, another at the stairwell. You do not leave the building without me or Nico. You answer your phone when it rings. You do not meet anyone alone who mentions your brother. Are we clear? The rules stacked up, each one another strand of invisible wire around my life. That sounds like a prison, I said before I could stop myself. It is protection, he said. Prisons care whether you walk out. I did not intend to lose track of you at all. I should have flinched at that. Part of me did. Another part, the one that had watched Kofi tied to a chair and heard the quiet certainty in the stranger's voice, clung to the idea with both hands. If anyone could keep Luca's men from dragging me into a car, it was the man in front of me. What about my parents? I asked. They will notice if I stop coming home. We will tell them a truth that suits us, he said. That you have been promoted to night manager, and staying here makes more sense with the hours. You're not a child. They cannot drag you back. If Luca tries to use them as well as your brother, I will know. There was something so absolute in the way he said it that my knees almost gave out. Why are you doing this? I whispered. You could fire me. Send me away. Pretend you never heard my name. His eyes hardened. Because Luca chose to involve my restaurant, my staff, my rules. If I look the other way now, everyone will know they can walk into La Serena and threaten what is mine. That is not going to happen. The possessive word wrapped around me again. This time, instead of feeling like a brand, it felt like a shield I had not asked for but desperately needed. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. Rocco held out his hand for it. I gave it to him without thinking. He glanced at the screen, then his mouth tightened. Nico, he said, putting the call on speaker. Talk. We traced the number. Nico's voice crackled through the small space. Signal bounces, but it keeps returning to the same cluster near the old docks. Not the tourist side. Warehouses. We pulled sound from the video. There is music from a local station and a train horn that matches the line behind Pier 6. My bet is one of the abandoned storage blocks there. Good, Rocco said. Send everything to my phone. Keep eyes on the area, but do not move until I say. We are not rushing this. Understood, Nico replied. What about the girl? Rocco looked straight at me as he answered. She is with me, he said, and Luca thinks she is his weapon. His gaze chilled, thoughtful and sharp. If Luca wants to play games at my table, I added quietly, then we will give him a game he does not forget. Giada's eyes widened, but I did not explain. Not yet. She was shaking and exhausted and hanging on to herself by threads. Strategy could wait. Protecting the peace Luca thought was weak could not. I sent her upstairs with one of my men, watched until the stairwell door closed behind her, then turned back to the empty office. The metal box with the vial sat on the desk, small and patient. I locked the office door, crossed to the corner cabinet, and opened the panel that most people thought was just wood. The monitors flickered to life, one after another. The restaurant unfolded in grainy black and white across a wall of screens. The bar, the entrance, the dining room, the alley, the kitchen. And because I had insisted from the first week she worked for me, the camera in the narrow corridor by the staff exit. I rewound the footage to earlier that night. Customers at tables, waiters moving like fish through water. Then Giada appeared, weaving between chairs with a tray balanced on one hand, that careful smile on her face. I muted the sound. I did not need it. I had watched this scene too many times. She placed plates, joked with the older regulars, nodded respectfully to men whose names never went on official reservations. When a group of kids hovered by the glass outside, noses pressed to the window, I saw her hand slip an extra basket of bread to the hostess and jerk her chin toward the door. Moments later, the kids stepped back into the night with food wrapped in napkins, laughing. She thought I did not notice. She thought I was just the man in the corner who signed checks and decided who lived. I switched to another angle. Giada by the bar, washing glasses, listening with that polite nod while the bartender complained about his ex. A man with a knife scar across his mouth came in, muttered something about a shipment that did not arrive. Her eyes slid away, as they always did when talk turned sharp. Not curious, not stupid, just smart enough to know that questions got people buried. I had been watching her for months. At first it was only because she was efficient. A restaurant like La Serena runs on skill and silence. She had both. Then it was because she never tried to flirt her way into better shifts, never slipped phone numbers to important men, never played games. She served, collected tips, went home. Then one night, a busboy dropped a tray of glasses in the middle of the floor. The crash made half the room flinch. Giada did not. She laughed, quick and bright, and started clapping. The whole staff joined her, turning the disaster into a joke until the boy's face went from crimson to relieved. That laugh stayed in my head longer than it should have. Now another image burned there too. Her in my office chair with her face wet and her hands torn up by napkins, saying Luca's name like it cost her blood. Using her was more than an insult. It was a message written directly over the one thing in this place I had never intended to put on the table. That made it personal in a way Luca had not planned. My jaw tightened. I killed the feed from the dining room and stared at my own reflection in the dark monitor. People in this city loved to tell stories about me. They said I'd been born in violence, that my heart was made of stone, that I could not be surprised. They did not know the boy I used to be before tattoos and suits and men who would kill on my word. He had a family once. I closed my eyes and let the memory drag me back across an ocean. Concrete blocks, narrow hallways that smelled of boiled cabbage and cigarette smoke. Winter so cold it crept through the cracks in the windows and settled in your bones. My father running numbers for men who never smiled. My mother counting coins on the kitchen table while my little sister drew shapes in the frost on the glass. Debt has a smell, a sour, metallic edge like fear and old coins. I learned it young. When my father finally gambled with money that did not belong to him, I was 16. The men who came to collect did not bother shouting. They sat at our table, drank our tea, and told my parents exactly how long they had to fix their mistake. My mother pawned what little jewelry she owned. I started working nights, unloading trucks in places where the police did not visit. It was not enough. The second time the men came, they did not sit. They asked for my father, then my mother, then my sister. They spoke about collateral, about leverage, about how fear concentrates the mind. I still remember the look in my mother's eyes when she realized they were not leaving without someone. She went instead of us. She thought they would use her presence to keep my father in line. They used her to make a point. We found her 3 days later, floating in the river outside the city. The message was clear. When people broke their word, everything they loved became currency. The boy was died that week. I worked, I fought, I took every job no one else wanted. Years later, when I had enough power to breathe without asking permission, I made a promise. No one would use my people the way those men had used my mother. If they tried, they would not live to brag about it. La Serena was built on that promise. From the outside, it was a good restaurant in a good location with good food. Inside, it was more. It was neutral ground for meetings. A place where deals were made under my ceiling with my eyes on every table. No weapons drawn, no beatings, no blood. The world outside could burn. Inside these walls, I decided the rules. Luca had just tried to rewrite them. I opened my eyes, the room snapping back into focus. The monitors hummed softly. The box on the desk waited. Luca Dragan liked to style himself as new blood. He grew up on stories of men like me and decided he deserved the same respect without doing the same work. His crew moved in on smuggling lines near the old docks, bought cheap loyalty with quick cash, waved guns around in places that still remembered order. We had brushed against each other a few times. A shipment diverted here, a courier poached there. Nothing big enough to justify a full confrontation. He wanted ground that belonged to me, but he had not yet made the mistake that would let me take it without turning half the city into a war zone. Tonight, he had. He touched my restaurant, my staff, my rules. He took a boy and handed my waitress a bottle meant for my glass, knowing she worked within my walls. Kofi was just a kid. That mattered. So did the fact that Luca believed Giada would break in the direction he wanted. I needed to answer in a way that would clean the debt, keep the authorities uninterested, and remind every watching I who actually ran this side of the water. An open war will be messy and loud. A simple bullet in Luca's skull would satisfy me, but not send a big enough message, which left the old ways. The house game. I had not called for one in years. The tradition was older than most of the men who whispered my name. 2 leaders under one roof. Cards and money on the table. Territory, debts, and terms agreed before the first hand was dealt. No hired killers, no outside interference. Witnesses from other families to confirm the outcome. Winner took everything laid down. Loser walked away with pride cracked and power gone, if he walked away at all. The city respected that kind of theater. It understood it. It listened when titles were won in the open under lights instead of in alleys. If Luca wanted to send a message through my restaurant, then the answer would come from the same place, in front of the same audience. I shut down most of the monitors and hit the intercom on the desk. "Nico," I said when he answered. "Come up." He arrived a minute later, shoulders broad enough to block the doorway. He looked from the cameras to the closed metal box and back to me. "You sent the girl upstairs?" he asked. "Yes." She seemed ready to shatter. "She did not," I said. "She told me the truth while she was still standing. That is more than I can say for half the men we work with." He gave a short nod. "What is the plan?" "We are not putting a bullet in Luca in the street," I said. "He wants spectacle. He's going to get it. I am calling for a house game." Nico's brows rose. "You are sure? This started in my restaurant. It ends here." I leaned back in my chair. "We shut the place to the public for one night. We invite Luca to a peace dinner. We let him think he is clever, that he has pushed me into opening my doors. He brings his men, I bring mine, and half the underworld comes to watch. And Giada, she stays upstairs," I said sharply. "He does not see her again until I decide he can. She is under my roof because he took her brother. She does not sit at the table. She is not part of the game." Nico hesitated. "She already is, whether you want it or not." I knew that. I also knew what would have happened if I had walked into my office 10 minutes later and found someone else there instead of Giada. "If he had hurt her," I said quietly, "we would not be talking about cards right now. We would be finding places to hide bodies." Nico studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then it is good you have cameras everywhere. Send the invitation," I said. "Make it sound like an apology. Tell Luca I want to clear the air, discuss the docs, settle misunderstandings. Use all the words cowards like to hear." Nico's mouth twitched. "I will let him think he is winning. Make sure he believes it," I said. "Men like Luca always walk more confidently into a trap when they think they built it themselves." He turned to go, but I stopped him with his name. "Nico." He looked back. "Double the guards on the upstairs door," I said. "No one goes up or down without my word. If anyone asks, Giada is staying late to help with inventories. You trust her?" "I trust her more than I trust Luca," I said. "That is enough." When he left, the office felt too quiet again. I was alone with my reflection in the dark monitor and the echo of Giada's voice saying her brother's name. I thought of her carrying plates through the dining room, pretending not to see the things that would scare anyone with sense. I thought of her slipping bread to hungry kids, of the way she had laughed that night the glasses shattered, making the whole staff forget they had almost cut their feet open. And I thought of her sitting in my chair, shoulders shaking, still trying to protect everyone but herself. Luca had fired the first shot by making her cry. The next move belonged to me. I picked up the phone one last time and dialed a number that went straight to a man who owed me favors and liked to gossip. "Tell our friend Luca that La Serena is hosting a special dinner. Tell him the house will host the game, and this time the cards decide who walks out." I did not hear those words when Rocco said them. At that moment, I was climbing the narrow stairs behind the kitchen, escorted by a man with a gun under his jacket and orders not to let me out of his sight. Later, when Nico repeated the phrase with a crooked half-smile, the words slid into place like the last piece of a puzzle I never asked to solve. That night blurred into car horns outside and the low rumble of voices below my feet. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. I woke to the smell of coffee. For a second, I thought I was home, in the tiny bedroom I shared with my sister when we were younger, before everyone grew too big and the bills grew too high. Then the ceiling above me came into focus, white and a little cracked at the corners. The room was unfamiliar and too quiet. No clutter, no family. The apartment above La Serena was small but neat. A worn sofa by the window, a table that could seat two at most, a kitchenette with matching plates and mugs, all in muted colors. My uniform skirt hung over the back of a chair where I had dropped it the night before. My shoes sat neatly side by side beside the door, because even when my world tried to fall apart, my habits refused to. Voices drifted up from the restaurant below, muffled through the floor. Pots clanged. Someone cursed in Italian. The faint smell of garlic and onions reached my nose, and my stomach answered with a low growl. Then I heard the softer sound outside my door. A footstep, too controlled to belong to the kitchen staff. A knock, 2 short taps. Giada. Rocco's voice. I sat up fast and pulled the blanket tighter around myself, suddenly aware that my hair was flattened on one side and my eyes were probably puffy from the night before. 1 minute. I called, scrambling for the clean blouse I had folded on the chair. I threw it on over the tank top I'd slept in, tied my hair back into a low puff as best I could without a mirror, and opened the door. He stood in the hallway, filling it the way he filled his office doorway. Everything black and steel and controlled energy. In one hand, he held a paper tray with 2 cups of coffee. In the other, a small brown bag that smelled like warm bread and cheese. Behind him, a man I did not know leaned against the wall with his arms folded, eyes waiting on nothing. "Good morning," Rocco said. It sounded almost normal. "Morning," I managed. He looked past me into the room, as if checking for threats, then stepped inside without asking. The guard stayed in the hall, the door left open just a fraction. Rocco set the tray and bag on the table and gestured toward the small chair. "Sit. Eat. I'm not very hungry," I started, but my stomach disagreed loudly enough to betray me. One corner of his mouth lifted. "Your body says otherwise." I sat. He unpacked the food with quick, precise movements. 2 toasted rolls, sliced and filled with eggs and cheese. 2 coffees, dark and strong. He slid 1 plate toward me and opened the lid of the nearest cup. "You will need energy," he said. "Today will be long." "That is comforting," I muttered, then flushed when I realized I'd said it out loud. He did not look offended. I did not specialize in comfort, only in results. We ate in silence for a few minutes. My first sip of coffee burned my tongue and settled hot in my stomach. The food was better than anything I could usually afford before a shift. "How is Kofi?" I asked finally, because the question had been vibrating under my skin since I woke up. "We know the area where they are holding him," Rocco said. "My men are watching every door. No one goes in or out without us knowing. That is not the same as bringing him home. No, it is the step before." He met my eyes, steady. "I will not rush this and make a mistake that gets him killed. Pride does not interest me. Winning does, with all of us breathing at the end." I wanted to believe him. The problem was that I had spent most of my life watching powerful men choose pride over sense. "Luca might hurt him anyway," I whispered, "just to prove he can." "He might try," Rocco agreed. "He will not succeed." The certainty in his voice made something in my chest unclench. I exhaled slowly. "What did you mean last night about a game?" I asked. "Nico mentioned it. A house game." He took another swallow of coffee before answering, like he was choosing his words carefully. "In my world, there are very few ways to settle disputes without blood on every street," he said. "The house game is one of them. 2 men, 1 table, many witnesses. Cards, chips, and terms agreed in advance. The house, in this case La Serena, hosts. It guarantees the rules. Anyone who breaks them loses more than money. Like trial by cards," I said. His lips quirked. "Something like that. And you invited Luca to this." "I gave him exactly what he wants," Rocco said. "A chance to sit at my table as if we are equals. A chance at territory and money. If he believes he can win without firing a shot, he will come. Men like Luca always prefer to feel clever while they are digging their own graves." A shiver ran down my spine at the casual way he said it. "What are the terms?" I asked. "Exactly. When I win," he said without hesitation, "Kofi is released and every debt Luca claims against your family disappears. He gives up his claim on the docks and stays away from my lines. No more men near my restaurant. No more games involving my staff. And if he wins?" I forced myself to ask. Rocco's jaw tightened. "Then he gets a percentage of La Serena's profits and the right to use the back rooms as his territory for business. On paper, it sounds generous. In practice, it would never happen, because you will not let him win," I said softly. Because I do not lose in my own house. The confidence should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it felt like someone reinforcing weak beams in a collapsing ceiling. I looked down at my hands, suddenly aware of how this all sounded from a distance. It is only at that table because of me, I said. If I did not work here, if Kofi owed money to some small-time dealer instead, Luca would not care. He would not be sitting at your table with my brother's life as chips. This is happening because of me. Rocco leaned forward, elbows on the table, the gold chains at his throat glinting. This is happening because Luca does not know his place, he said. He is at my table because he tried to use you as a weapon. That is his mistake, not yours. I was ready to do it, I admitted, the words tasting like ash. For a moment last night, I thought I could actually put that stuff in your drink and pretend it was just another bottle from the bar. If you had not walked in, maybe I would have. That is on me. He watched me for a long moment. You did not, he said finally. You chose to tell me instead, knowing I could decide you were a threat. I do not let my people trade themselves away, not to men like Luca. So no, Giada, this is not on you. The way he said my name did something strange to my pulse. Fear and gratitude tangled together until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. A sudden sting burned the corner of my eye. I blinked it away, annoyed with myself. Apparently my body had decided cry in front of Rocco once was not enough humiliation for a lifetime. He reached across the table. For a second, I thought he was going to push the plate closer again. Instead, his knuckles brushed my cheek, catching the tear before it could fall. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but his fingers were warm. You are allowed to be afraid, he said quietly. You are not allowed to blame yourself for Luca's choices. My breath stalled. No one had ever told me I was allowed to be afraid. I had always been the one telling everyone else it would be fine, even when I knew it might not. Thank you, I managed. His hand dropped back to the table. The air between us felt different now, charged in a way that had nothing to do with poison or games. I looked down at my coffee again, trying to will my heartbeat into something normal. A sharp knock sounded at the doorframe. Nico stepped inside without waiting, eyes scanning the room, then settling on Rocco. He nodded politely at me. Apologies, he said. We have an update. Rocco straightened. Talk. We narrowed the warehouse block, Nico said. Pier 6, Building 14 or 15. Heat signatures match a small group inside. No movement of vehicles since late last night. If we go in now, we can take them before they know what is happening. My whole body leaned toward him. Then go. Nico's gaze flicked to me, then back to Rocco. He did not answer me. We wait, Rocco said. I stared at him. Wait? For what exactly? For Luca to think he is safe, Rocco replied. If we storm the building now and things go wrong, Luca will know it was because of you. He will change his plans for the game. He will move his people. He might decide Kofi is more trouble than he is worth. He might decide that anyway. I shot back. Yes, Rocco said, which is why there are 3 teams watching every exit and a doctor on standby. If he tries to move your brother, we follow. If he touches him, he has signed his own death warrant in front of half the city. I wanted to scream that Kofi was not a strategy. He was my little brother who still forgot his house keys and burned toast. Instead, I pressed my nails into my palms until the sting grounded me. So we do nothing, I said. We prepare, Rocco corrected. We make sure when Luca walks into my restaurant, he does it thinking about what he wants to win, not what he is about to lose. Nico's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Message from Luca's second, he said. He accepts the invitation to the dinner. Says he looks forward to resolving old tensions. Of course he does, Rocco murmured. He took a breath and nodded. Good. Confirm the date and time. Remind him the house is neutral ground. No guns inside. His men will be searched at the door. Nico left to make the arrangements. The apartment felt smaller again. Rocco stood. On the night of the dinner, you will stay up here, he said. Door locked. Phone on. You will not step onto the stairs, not even to listen. I nodded automatically, because arguing with Rocco was like arguing with a storm. It made you feel brave for a second, and then left you wet and tired with nothing changed. Yes, I said. He studied me. as if weighing the promise on my tongue and finding it lighter than he liked. Giada. His voice softened, warning and concern braided together. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. You do not go near that room. Not once. Do you understand? Understand, I said. And I did. I understood the danger, the stakes, the fact that if Lucas saw me during that game, he would use it. What I did not understand was how I was supposed to sit in this apartment while my brother's life and my bosses were being shuffled and dealt downstairs. Rocco left a few minutes later, taking his heat and his certainty with him. The guard outside resumed his post, a silent reminder that this was not normal anymore. I cleared the plates with mechanical movements, my thoughts already drifting downward to the kitchen, the dining room, the private room that would soon hold a table and two men who thought they knew how this story ended. I told myself I would do what Rocco said. I would lock the door on the night of the game and stay away from the stairs. But as I stood at the small window and looked down at the alley, watching Nico's men shift their weight in the shadows, one stubborn truth settled in my chest. When the night came and the cards started to fall, there was no way I was going to sit quietly upstairs and pretend I was not part of it. Maybe Rocco knew that. Maybe that was why, the next evening after closing, he did not send me straight up to the apartment. Instead, he waited until the last staff member slipped out the back, then crooked his fingers at me from the doorway of the empty dining room. Come, he said. You need to learn something. The room felt different without customers. Chairs were turned upside down on tables, the floor freshly mopped, the soft lighting turned low. The sea pressed against the windows in the distance, a dark mass instead of a glittering backdrop. What are we doing? I asked, rubbing a damp ring off my wrist where a tray had rested all night. Rocco stood at the center of the room, hands loose at his sides, tattoos dark against the rolled sleeves of his shirt. Walk, he said, like you would during a shift. I blinked. You brought me down here to practice serving invisible customers. His mouth twitched slightly. You already know how to do that. I'm teaching you something else. Walk. I sighed and took a few steps, weaving between tables as if carrying a tray, the way I had done 1,000 times. It felt stupid at first, like a game, until his voice cut across the room. Stop. Where are your exits? I glanced at the main doors. There. He waited. The kitchen, I added slowly, and the side door by the bar. Windows. They do not open, I said. Too heavy. So in a problem, you do not waste time on them. He gestured toward the bar. Again, we repeated the circuit. Every few steps, he stopped me with a question. Who at that table is most likely to be carrying a weapon? I looked at the empty chairs, imagining faces. My mind filled in details from dozens of nights. The man who keeps his jacket on, I said, even when the room is warm. Why? Because he does not want to take his hand off whatever is under it. Rocco nodded. Good. What about there? The one who sits with his back to the wall, I said, so he can see everyone come in, and if you see two like that at the same table, stay out of the line between them. He smiled, quick and sharp. You learn fast. It went on like that. He made me stand in different spots and describe where I would move if someone came through the door shouting, if a glass broke, if a gun appeared. He showed me how to notice the weight of a jacket, the stiffness in shoulders that did not match the conversation, the way eyes flicked toward exits when people lied. You do not need to become a soldier, he said, but you should not be blind, especially now. Fear can freeze you, or it can focus you. If you learn to aim it, it becomes a weapon. My pulse beat in my throat. I did not want to live in a world where I need that. You already do, he said softly. The difference is whether you admit it. At some point, I stopped feeling foolish and started seeing the room through his eyes. The restaurant I thought I knew shifted, opening secret layers. Suddenly, La Serena was not just tables and chairs and tips. It was angles and escape routes and patterns of movement that could mean survival. By the time he finally said, "Enough for tonight," my feet ached and my head buzzed. We walked back toward the stairs together. He did not let me go up. Instead, he veered toward the small staff lounge off the hallway, flicked on the light, and nodded for me to sit. You have questions, he said. Ask. He was right, of course. I sat on the edge of the worn sofa, twisting my hands together. You said before that you know my family sends money to each other. How much do you actually know? Enough, he said. but you can tell me the parts one do not. So I did. I told him about the tiny shop my parents used to own, how they sold groceries and household things to neighbors who were always late paying, how the bills piled higher than the stock, how the landlord raised the rent and the roof started leaking in the same year. They kept saying it would turn around. I said, that one good month would catch us up. One good month never came. I told him about Kofi getting caught with a group of boys stealing from a convenience store, how I had gone down to the station, shaking, and begged the owner not to press charges while my parents stood behind me looking older than I had ever seen them. I promised to pay him back in installments, I said, for my wages. I was 18. I had no idea how long that would actually take, but he believed me, or he believed my fear. After that, I worked here and at a cafe in the mornings for a while, and we made it through. What about Kofi? Rocco asked. He said he would be better, I said. And he was, for a while. Then he started hanging around new people, talking about easy money and fast ways out. I tried to warn him, but he just laughed and called me his second mother. Bitterness crept into my voice. I did not bother to hide it. I'm always the one fixing things, I said quietly. I fill in when a staff member is sick. I cover the bills when my parents come up short. I smooth things over when Kofi gets into trouble. If something breaks, everyone looks at me like I'm supposed to hold it together with my bare hands. And now, Rocco said, you think you broke this too? My throat worked. I took this job because the tips were good and the hours fit with my other work. I stayed because it felt safe in its own way. Dangerous outside, but ordered inside. If Kofi ended up in front of Luca's people because he thought his big sister working for you meant something, then yes, I broke this. He regarded me for a long beat, then shook his head once. You did not bring this to your family, he said. My world did. You're not responsible for the gravity of men like Luca. You're just standing too close to it. There's a strange kindness in the words, buried under their blunt edges. Something in my chest loosened a fraction. Do you ever get tired of holding everything together? I asked suddenly, of being the one everyone looks at when things go wrong. He did not answer right away. His gaze shifted past me, as if he were looking at something only he could see. Yes, he said after a moment. But tired or not, someone has to do it. I decided a long time ago it would be me. He stood, then, and for a second I thought the conversation was over. Instead, he moved to the doorway, paused, and said, come upstairs. It is late. We climbed in silence. At my door, he nodded once and turned to go, but the question that had been on my tongue since he started teaching me about exits slipped out. Why you? I asked. Why did you decide it would be you? He hesitated, then gave a small, humorless smile. Because when I did not decide, he said, people I loved died. He left before I could ask anything else. Rocco, in my office, later that night, Nico sat across from me while I replayed our conversation in the lounge over and over in my head. Not the parts about strategies and exits. The part where Giada said she was tired of holding everyone together. I understood that more than she knew. Nico had heard the story before, but I told it again anyway. Some memories sharpen your focus when you drag them into the light. The first time I killed a man, I said, it was not for money or territory. It was for my cousin. He glanced up, familiar with the beginning but patient. He was 14, I continued. Scrawny, soft, liked to read more than fight. A local collector decided he was an easy target when my uncle fell behind on payments. Cornered him behind a shop and started making examples on his face. My fingers curled around the edge of the desk. I watched him hit a child, I said. I heard him talk about how much more persuasive a broken hand is to a father. Something in me went quiet. Not loud, just final. When he turned his back, I picked up a piece of pipe and did what I had to do. Silence stretched between us. After that, people looked at me differently, I said. They stopped testing my family with their hands and started testing my patience with their words. I built on that. Every story they told about me was one less excuse for someone to use us as leverage. I glanced at the monitor showing the stairwell camera. Giada appeared for a moment, heading toward the apartment, shoulders straight, head high despite everything. That reputation protect her now? I said quietly. Luca forgot that when he used her. I will remind him. Giada, Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it dragged me through dreams of card tables and glass vials and Kofi calling my name from a place I could not reach. The next day blurred into prep work and sidelong glances. Staff whispered about the restaurant closing early for a private event, about important guests and special menus. No one asked me why I was upstairs so much. Maybe they were too polite. Maybe they were too afraid of the armed men who seemed to have multiplied around the exits. That evening, after the last of the regular customers left, Rocco called me downstairs again. We checked inventory in the storage room, or pretended to. The conversation drifted back to my family, his rules, the way the city bent around certain names. At some point I realized we were not talking about work anymore. He leaned against a shelving unit, sleeves pushed up, forearms crossed. The harsh overhead light carved shadows into his face, but when he looked at me, there was nothing cold in his eyes. "It is strange," I said, tracing the rim of an empty crate with my fingertip. "People talk about you like you're a monster. Then you bring me breakfast and teach me how to spot a gun, and I do not know how to put those versions together." "Both are true," he said. "That is not reassuring. It is honest." He pushed off the shelf and stepped closer. Not close enough to trap, but close enough that I could see the flecks of lighter blue around his pupils. "I'm not a good man, Giada," he said. "I have done things that would keep you awake for the rest of your life, if I described them. But I choose where that darkness goes. Right now it goes toward Luca. Not you. Not your family." The words wrapped around me, heavy and warm. My heart picked up speed. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air thickened between us, full of things I did not know how to name yet. His gaze dipped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. My breath hitched. If Nico's voice had not echoed down the hallway right then, I do not know what I would have done. "Rocco," he called. "We need to talk about security for the east entrance." Rocco stepped back, the spell snapping like a stretched rubber band. He did not look away from me. "Later," he said softly, and I did not know if he meant the conversation or the almost something that had just hung between us. On my way back upstairs after they met, I paused on the landing when I heard my name. The voices came from the office below, the door not quite shut. I knew I should keep walking. Instead I froze, listening. "If Luca cheats even once," Rocco was saying, his tone like sharpened glass, "I will end him and burn everything he touches. I want that clear in every man's head before they step into my restaurant that night." Nico answered, his voice lower. I could not make out the words, only the agreement in them. A chill slid down my spine. I had known it would be dangerous. Hearing the promise in his voice made it real in a way nothing else had. Footsteps moved toward the door. I jolted in emotion and hurried the rest of the way up the stairs. By the time Rocco caught up with me on the upper landing, my hand was already on the apartment doorknob. He stopped beside me, looking tired and wired at the same time. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow will be worse." Comforting, as always, I said weakly. His mouth twitched. Then he grew serious. "Stay here during the game," he reminded me. This time I expect more than a nod. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "I will stay," I said. The promise sat on my tongue, neat and clean. It was not a lie exactly. I would stay until I could not, until the sounds from below grew too loud and the thought of my brother sitting in some concrete room became unbearable. Rocco searched my face for a moment, then reached out and touched my shoulder, just once, his hand warm through the fabric of my blouse. "Trust me," he said quietly. "I'm trying," I answered. After he left, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. I wanted to trust him. I did, more than made sense. But trust did not erase the knot of dread in my stomach, or the knowledge that when the night finally came, I would not be able to sit still while the man downstairs gambled with both our lives and called it a game. The night came faster than I wanted. By the time the last regular customer left La Serena, the sky outside had gone from blue to deep ink, and the sea was a dark, restless shape beyond the glass. Staff moved with unusual quiet, stacking chairs, polishing silver that had already been polished that morning. Everyone felt it. Something heavy in the air, thicker than cooking smoke and salt. Rocco sent most of them home early. The ones who remained had been briefed, eyes sharper than usual, movements neat and contained. I watched the rituals from the small apartment window above, forehead resting against the cool glass. In the private room, a long table appeared where three smaller ones usually stood. White cloth, green felt runner, neat stacks of chips, fresh decks of cards in their unopened sleeves. Bottles of dark liquor lined up like soldiers, crystal glasses gleaming under the light. It looked almost beautiful from a distance, like something out of film. It did not feel beautiful. Rocco had ordered me upstairs an hour earlier, his tone flat and absolute. I had obeyed with my feet and not at all with my mind. Every sound from below seemed magnified. The clink of glass, the low murmur of voices, the thunk of crate lids being closed for the night. When a knock came at the main doors, even from above I knew it was not a customer. Rocco. Luca arrived exactly on time, which told me he was more nervous than he wanted to appear. Confident men in this life make other people wait. Men who need the room to see them walk and arrive at the minute a meeting is called. He stepped through the door with 4 men at his back, all in expensive clothes and cheap cologne. He smiled as if he were a friendly neighbor here to borrow sugar, not a kidnapper walking into the house of the man he had tried to poison. Rocco, he said, spreading his arms. It has been too long. Not long enough. I answered, but I gave him my hand. The witnesses were watching. We both knew how this had to look. 3 other bosses, older men with eyes like dull knives, stood near the wall. They did not greet us warmly. They were here for the same reason sharks circle a wounded animal. To see who bled first and how much meat would be left afterward. We moved to the private room. The doors closed behind us with a soft thud. My men took their places along one wall, Luca's along the other. No one sat but the 2 of us. I placed my hand on the back of the nearest chair. Before we begin, I said, we speak the rules aloud. Luca rolled his eyes, but made a show of adjusting his cuffs, settling into his seat as if we were at some polite charity game. Fine, he said. Let the old ghosts hear us. I ignored the attempt to humor. I wanted every word to echo in this room, to be remembered later by anyone tempted to claim they had not heard. In this house game, I said, you and I sit. No one else touches the cards. No one else touches the chips. There are witnesses to hear the terms. If I win, the boy you took walks free tonight, unhurt, and any debt you claim against his family is gone. You pull your people off the docks you have been sniffing around, and you stay away from my lines. I held his gaze. If you win, you take a percentage of La Serena's profits, and you earn access to the back rooms for your business, but you do not own the house. You do not own my staff. One of the older men cleared his throat. And no violence inside the restaurant, he said. No knives, no guns, no fists. The table decides. Everyone leaves under their own power. That is the rule, I agreed. Luca lifted his glass in a mocking toast. No violence in the pretty restaurant, he said. My mother would be proud. He was lying. His mother had died in a police raid years ago. He had told the story himself, more than once, when he wanted sympathy from men old enough to care. Say the words, I told him. He sighed. Fine. I agree to the terms. The boy walks if you win. The docks are yours. If I win, I get my share and a key to your back rooms. No one starts a fight in here. Happy now? Not yet, I said. But I will be. The witnesses nodded. The first deck came out of its sleeve, cards crisp and new in my hands. I had opened the box myself earlier, marked nothing, stacked nothing. That would have defeated the purpose. I did not need a crooked deck to beat Luca. I needed his arrogance. Giada. From upstairs, the restaurant sounded strangely muffled, like someone had wrapped the whole building in thick cloth. I paced the length of the apartment, every creak of the floorboards an accusation. You promised him you would stay. You also promised yourself you would not sit here and wait for news of your brother's body. Somewhere below, chairs shifted. I imagined them in that private room, Rocco and Luca facing each other, the long table between them like a line drawn on a map. Nico and the others standing nearby, hands probably folded in front of them to appear harmless, eyes always scanning. A burst of laughter rose, Luca's voice, too loud and bright. My hands clenched. No, I whispered to the empty room. I cannot do this. I slipped out of my shoes. My socks whispered against the cool floor as I crossed to the door. The guard Rocco had posted would be at the bottom of the main stairs. The kitchen staff, still cleaning, would be at the back. The service stairs behind the pantry, though, were narrow and mostly used for storage. I had walked them twice before when helping carry up boxes. No one ever watched them closely. My heart hammered as I eased the apartment door open. The hallway outside was empty. The murmur from below grew clearer. I patted down the corridor, every step a betrayal and a necessity at the same time. The door to the service stairs opened with a faint scrape. I froze, listening. No one shouted. I slipped inside and pulled it gently closed behind me. The stairwell was dim, lit only by a single bulb halfway down. I could hear my own breath, too loud in the small space. I moved slowly, careful to avoid the step I knew creaked, fingers brushing the rough wall for balance. At the bottom, a narrow door led into a side hallway off the main dining room. I cracked it the width of a finger and peered through. From here I could see only part of the private room through its open doorway. The long table, the top halves of the men seated at it. Rocco's profile, calm and carved in stone. Luca opposite him, grinning too wide. I pressed my back against the wall, just out of sight, breathing shallow, every nerve straining toward the room. Rocco. The cards slid smoothly between my fingers. I dealt, cut, burned, moved chips without hurry. The rhythm settled into my muscles, comfortable as an old shirt. Luca tried to look relaxed, slouched in his chair, but his eyes were bright and sharp. He watched everything. Good. A man who thinks he is in control tells you more than one who knows he is not. The first rounds followed the usual pattern. Small bets, cautious calls. Luca won a hand, then lost one. I let him take a few small pots to feed his confidence. His men laughed at his jokes on cue. Mine stood silent. From the corner of my vision, I saw one of the witnesses glance at the clock. They had been expecting fireworks. Instead, they got cards and polite insults. For now, tell me, Lucas said, attempting a lazy drawl. How is our little waitress? My fingers did not pause. Safe, I said. He smirked. She looked fragile on the video. All those tears. I was worried she might make a mess on your nice floors. The witness nearest him shifted, uncomfortable. I placed my cards down, raising one brow. You spent a lot of time thinking about my staff. I spent a lot of time thinking about leverage, he said. You know how it is. No one respects a man who cannot be moved. It was almost funny hearing him explain my own philosophy to me. Almost. You made a mistake touching what is mine, I said quietly. Tonight is your chance to correct it. He laughed and pushed a stack of chips into the center. We will see who corrects what. I called. The hand played out. His grin faded by degrees as the cards turned against him. When I laid down my final card, the room exhaled. Unlucky, I said. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He reached for his drink and swallowed half of it in one go. The next few rounds were worse for him. Small losses, then a larger one. Each time he tried to push the advantage, I slipped sideways and left him reaching for air. It was a kind of violence, just quieter. Then, eventually, the pattern demanded balance. He needed to win something big to stay at the table in spirit. I let the next hand build. He watched my face, searching for a crack that was not there. I watched the twitch in his fingers, the way he leaned forward fraction too far when he thought he was ahead. By the time the last card fell, the pot was heavy. He turned over his hand with a flourish, revealing enough to beat most men. His smile came back in full force. Seems the house bleeds after all, he said. I lay my cards down slowly, just shy of his. Second best. Deliberate. The room went quiet. Luca's men let out low whistles. The witnesses exchanged looks. A muscle in my jaw ticked once. Let him see that, I thought. Let him think he finally pushed me. A man who believes he has hurt you will always overreach. Giada. Even from my hiding place, I could feel the shift. The hum of the room grew rougher. Laughter edged with something sharper. I heard Luca's voice, smug and loud, and then the lower rumble of Rocco's answer. I could not make out the words, only the change in temperature. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a small, insistent buzz that made me jump. For a second, I was sure everyone in the restaurant had heard it. No one stormed into the hallway. The game continued. I fumbled it out, shielding the screen with my hand. A message from an unknown number flashed up. Just 3 words, all in capitals. "We see him." My heart climbed into my throat. I knew who had sent it. Nico had given me the number earlier, told me if anything changed I would hear from it. Another message appeared before I could type a reply. "Orders are kill before sunrise. Outcome does not matter." The hallway spun. I braced one hand against the wall, fighting down a wave of nausea. So that was it. The game downstairs was theater. Luca would shake hands, maybe even lose, and somewhere in a concrete room by the pier, Kofi's life would be ended quietly regardless. My brother was not a bargaining chip. He was a calendar mark, an example in the making. Heat rushed through me, burning away the thin crust of fragile calm I had been holding on to. Waiting here, listening to cards slap, wood, and glasses tap, was pointless. Whatever happened at that table, it would not save Kofi on its own. My gaze slid down the hallway to where Rocco's office door sat closed, heavy and dark. I knew what he kept inside. I knew there was a safe, that he opened it with hands that did not shake, that it held more than cash and papers. The next burst of laughter from the private room felt like an insult. I turned away from the sliver of the game that I could see and headed for the office, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The hallway felt longer than usual, stretched by fear. Every step sounded too loud in my ears. I kept expecting a hand to slam into my shoulder, a voice to bark my name, for Rocco to appear and drag me back upstairs. Nothing happened. The private room hummed behind me, with muted conversation and the soft clink of glass. The office door gave under my hand. I slipped inside and closed it quietly, my fingers clumsy on the handle. The room was dark except for the thin strip of light leaking in from the bottom of the door. I crossed the desk and fumbled for the lamp. The warm glow snapped on, revealing the familiar shapes. Desk, chair, filing cabinet. The metal box where Rocco had once placed the vial. It sat closed now, its presence making my skin crawl. I went straight to the drawers. Pens, receipts, a stack of envelopes. Nothing that could help me. My hands moved faster, sliding files aside, opening and closing until my pulse climbed higher out of frustration. "You saw him open it," I whispered to myself. "Think. There had been a safe." The memory floated up, sharp and clear. Rocco kneeling in front of a dark panel on the wall, fingers tapping in numbers while I stood nearby, pretending not to see. He had not rushed. He had not cared that I could watch. My gaze swept the office. The panel looked like part of the wall, smooth and unremarkable beside the filing cabinet. My fingers found the almost invisible seam at the edge. I pressed, and it popped open with a soft click. The safe blinked at me in little red digits. I stared at the keypad, my mind suddenly blank. For a moment, panic squeezed everything else out. Then the numbers lined up in my head, a sequence I had not realized I remembered until that second. Month, day, year. A date he had said once, quickly, when someone asked why he drank alone every year on that night. My thumb hovered. Entering those numbers felt like stepping across a line that could not be uncrossed. I thought of Kofi tied to a chair and some concrete box of the message on my phone. Kill before sunrise. Outcome does not matter. My hand stopped shaking. I typed the code. The safe clicked. The handle turned beneath my palm. Inside, everything was neat. Stacks of cash bound with bands. Folders labeled in tidy handwriting. A small velvet box that I did not want to think about. And, resting on black foam, a pistol. It looked heavier than any gun I had seen in films. Blocks of black metal and intent. I reached for it anyway. My fingers closed around the grip, and I nearly dropped it from surprise. The weight dragged at my wrist, unfamiliar and solid. "This is insane," I breathed. I picked it up with both hands, testing the balance. Try to remember how people in movies held them. 2 hands, arms in front. Do not put your finger on the trigger until you are sure. Rocco had never given me that lesson. I pieced it together from fragments of memory and instinct. On the top shelf of the safe, a ring of keys caught the light. I grabbed that too and stuffed into my apron pocket. Basement doors, warehouse locks. Maybe. I did not know which I would need, but I knew I would rather have them than wish I did. I closed the safe and the panel, fingers moving automatically. The room fell quiet again, the gun heavy in my hands. A sound pricked my ears. The office had a small window set high in the wall, looking out over the interior stairwell that led to the balcony above the private room. I had never paid attention to it before. Now, movement flickered across the glass. I turned toward it. A man in a dark jacket and Lucas colors on his sleeve crept up the stairs, shoulders hunched, head slightly turned as if listening. In his right hand, angled close to his leg, was a gun. Not holstered. Ready. He moved carefully, footfalls placed with the kind of care that comes from experience. His gaze was fixed upward, toward the balcony that overlooked the game. He was not security. He was a blade, and his point was aimed directly at Rocco's head. Cold flooded my body, clearing everything else out. If he reached the balcony, he could lean over the rail, fire once, and disappear in the chaos. Luca would feign shock. The witnesses would swear the game had been fair until that moment. Kofi would die anyway. Rocco would never walk out of this building. I could run back to the private room and shout a warning. By the time anyone understood, it would be too late. Or I could stop the man before he got there. I did not remember deciding. 1 second, I was staring through the glass. The next, I was moving. I yanked the office door open and slipped into the stairwell, the gun clutched in both hands. The air in the narrow space smelled like dust and faint cleaning chemicals. The man was 3 steps above me now, his back to me, muscles shifting under his jacket. "Stop," I said. The word came out sharper than I expected, cutting through the hum of the restaurant. He twisted around, surprise flashing across his face. Up close, I could see the details. Dark hair cropped short, a scar splitting his eyebrow, smirk already forming, and his gun. So close I could see the metal catch the dim light. He took me in with one quick sweep. Uniform skirt, apron, shaking hands wrapped around a pistol that looked too big for me. His mouth curled. "What is this?" he asked. The waitress grew a spine. "Put it down," I said, tightening my grip. "Now." He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was soft and ugly in the stairwell. "You do not know how to use that thing," he said. "Your hands are shaking." He was right. My hand was shaking so badly I could feel the barrel wobble. But the aim was still pointed at his chest, and something in my eyes made his smile falter. "You are not going to shoot me," he said, but there was a sliver of doubt now. "I will if you take one more step," I said. Some distant part of me marveled at my own voice. It did not sound like a girl who cried between shifts. It sounded like someone made of hard edges and choices. He shifted his weight, testing me. Then, with a tiny shrug, he turned his body just enough to angle his own gun upward, past me, toward the balcony. He did not need to get all the way there. From his height, one shot could still reach the room. In that instant, everything slowed. I saw his finger sliding toward the trigger. I saw Rocco in my mind, seated at the table, head tilted as he read Luca's face, completely unaware of the bullet about to be threaded through the game. I saw Kofi tied to a chair, eyes wild and wide, calling my name like he had when he was little and scared of storms. I saw myself, carrying plates and pretending not to see bruises, telling myself that keeping my head down was enough to keep us safe. Something snapped. My finger moved. The gun exploded in my hands, the sound so loud it erased everything else. My arms jerked back with the force. For a heartbeat, I thought I had dropped the weapon. Then the man was falling, his eyes wide with shock, feet tangling on the steps. He crashed backward, body thudding against the stairs, gun slipping from his fingers and clattering down toward me. The impact sent a crack spiderwebbing through the small window in the office wall, tiny shards of glass tinkling onto the floor. The smell of gunpowder filled the stairwell, sharp and metallic, mixing with the iron scent of blood that my brain refused to process yet. Silence for half a second. Then the restaurant erupted. Chairs scraped. Voices shouted. Somewhere a glass shattered. I stood frozen above the fallen man, the pistol still in my hands, arms trembling so hard I thought my bones might rattle out of my skin. My ears rang with a high, constant whine. "Move," I told myself. My legs finally obeyed. I stepped over his body, trying not to look at his face, and started down the stairs. The gun felt fused to my fingers. I could not imagine letting it go now, as if it were the only thing keeping me from collapsing. At the bottom of the stairwell, the door to the main hallway stood open. The sounds from the private room were louder now, sharp and fragmented. I stepped through, heart pounding so fiercely I could taste it. The scene in the private room looked like a paused film. The long table was half overturned, cards scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Chairs had been shoved back. Men on both sides of the room had hands hovering near hidden weapons, instincts fighting with the rules they had agreed to. The witnesses stood in a tight cluster, eyes wide, calculating their own paths to the door if things broke open. Rocco stood near the table, body angled like he was ready to move in any direction. Luca was halfway out of his chair, face pale under the veneer of anger. Every head turned toward me as I stepped into view at the bottom of the stairs that led up to the balcony. For a second, no one spoke. Rocco's gaze dropped to the gun in my hands, then flicked to the stairwell behind me, where a pair of boots and a still leg were just visible in the shadows. His expression changed, something dark and bright flaring in his eyes at the same time. He took one step toward me, slow and deliberate, as if any sudden move might shatter the fragile control in the room. "Giada," he said, my name wrapped around me, steadying and terrifying all at once. His eyes met mine, taking in my shaking arms, the ringing in my ears, the fact that I was still standing. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. I heard my own voice answer from far away. "He was going to shoot you," I said, from the stairs. The rest of her words blurred under the pulse in my ears, but I had heard enough. I shifted my gaze from Giada to the stairwell, letting the room follow it. Every man in that space saw the boots on the steps, the still leg, the glint of fallen metal. A few of them swore under their breath. One of the older witnesses muttered something that sounded like a prayer. "Everyone lower your hands," I said, pitching my voice low and clear. "Now!" No one moved at first. Fingers stayed half-curled near jackets and belts. Luca's men watched me, waiting to see which way the wind turned. My own men watched them, ready to answer. "Luca," I said without looking at him, "you sent a man with a gun into my stairwell during a house game. That is a broken rule. If anyone fires another shot in here, it will not be mine." The first witness straightened. "He is right," he said. We all agreed. No violence inside the restaurant. I stepped away from the table, slow and deliberate, and crossed the room toward the stairs. Luca's hand twitched, like he wanted to reach for something, but the eyes on him were too many. "Hands down," I repeated. One by one, my men relaxed their shoulders and moved their hands into the open. Luca's had no choice but to follow. No one wanted to be the one who turned a broken rule into a slaughter with 3 bosses watching. When I reached Giada, I stopped just in front of her. Up close, I could see the fine tremor in her arms, the way her fingers locked around the pistol grip like it was the only solid thing in the room. Her pupils were blown wide, breath coming in short, sharp pulls. She had done something most soldiers never manage. Pulled a trigger on a moving target without years of training to force her hand. "Give it to me," I said gently. Her knuckles whitened. "It is over," I added, soft enough for only her to hear. "You hit what you aimed at." For a moment, I thought she could not let go. Then her fingers uncurled, one by one, and the weight of the gun passed into my palm. I turned slightly, keeping my body between her and the room, and held the weapon out to Nico without looking away from her. He took it, slid it behind his back, and moved a fraction closer to guard the bottom of the stairs. I set my hand on Giada's shoulder. It was not a comfort. It was a statement for everyone else. "She is under my protection," I said to the room at large. The man on those stairs was not invited. He came here to break the rules and kill the host. I let my gaze finally lock on Luca. "Which means this game," I said, "was already cheated." Luca's mouth twisted. "You cannot prove he is mine," he said. "You shoot some poor idiot in a hallway and call him my man. That does not make it true." He should have kept quiet. I almost felt grateful he did not. "Nico," I said, "bring the speaker." He moved to the sideboard where the glassware sat and picked up the small device I had placed there before the first card was dealt. It looked like part of the sound system. In reality, it was older and simpler. a recorder wired to the tiny microphone hidden in the light fixture above the table. Nico set it down in the middle of the felt. I walked back to the table, thumbed the button, and let the room fill with voices that had been spoken less than an hour ago. Luca's voice, relaxed and smug. "Of course I brought extra insurance," the recording version of him said. "If the cards turn against me, there are other ways to end this. He will not walk out of his pretty restaurant tonight." A pause, then another line even worse. "The boy is just seasoning," Luca's voice continued. "Kill him before sunrise, either way. That way everyone knows I'm not playing for show." The room went silent. The real Luca's face drained of color. "That is fake," he said immediately. "Spliced. He manipulates everything. You all know that." One of the witnesses stepped closer, listening to the accent, the inflection, the background clink of glasses they had just heard in this same room. Another man sniffed, as if he could smell the lie on Luca. "That is your voice," the first witness said. "Your words. Your plan," I added. "And your failure." I clicked the recording off. The silence afterward felt thick enough to chew. I drew my own pistol, slow and visible, and aimed it at Luca's chest. Every other gun in the room stayed holstered. No one wanted to stand between where this needed to go and where it was. "Take out your phone," I said. He swallowed, eyes darting around the room. He saw no help, only men measuring the distance between his body and the door. With stiff fingers, he pulled his phone from his pocket. "Call them," I said. "Speaker on. You will tell them the boy is off limits. No harm, no threats. You will say those words, and if you try anything else, I will end you before you finish the sentence. You cannot order me around like a child," he snapped, but his thumb was already pressing the screen. The line rang twice. A rough voice answered. "Yeah." I stepped closer to the phone, making sure my shadow fell over it. "Say it," I murmured. Luca glared at me, then spoke. "Plans have changed," he said, voice tight. "The boy stays alive. You do not touch him. You do not scare him. You stay where you are until you hear from me." On the other end, the man sounded confused. "You said before sunrise, no matter what. And now I am saying different." Luca snapped, desperation leaking into his tone. "You hurt him, and I will hurt you twice as bad. Do you understand?" I nodded once at Nico. He had his own phone to his ear, listening to the echo of the call through his second line, confirming location. When the warehouse name came up, he met my eyes and gave the smallest tilt of his head. "We're done," I said, and clicked the speaker off myself. "Go," I told Nico. "Take the first team. Bring the boy here." He did not waste time with words. Within seconds, he and 3 men were out of the room, moving through the back and into waiting cars. I turned my attention back to Luca. "The game is finished," I said. "You broke the rules the moment you sent that man into my stairwell and the moment you ordered a hostage killed regardless of the outcome. That puts the decision in my hands now, not the cards." The witnesses stepped forward together, the way men do when they have decided to stand on the same side of a line. "We agree," one of them said. "This game is void. The house wins by default." A murmur of assent moved through the room. None of them wanted Luca setting a precedent that rules could be broken this way. If he walked away untouched, the next man might think he could do the same to them. I holstered my gun and grabbed Luca by the back of his collar. He stumbled, swore, tried to twist free. I tightened my grip until his face flushed red. "We're not done," I told him. "We're just changing rooms." I dragged him toward the back exit, motioning for 2 of my men to bring the dead assassin from the stairs. When we reached the hallway, I glanced back. "Giada stays here," I said, with 2 guards at the door. Her eyes were huge, but she nodded. She was still trembling, but she was standing, spine straight. Blood had splattered on her sleeve, and she had not even noticed yet. "Sit," I told her quietly. "I will bring your brother home." I did not wait for her answer. Some promises should be made on the move. The alley behind La Serena smelled like old rain and oil. The sea wind cut through it, cold and sharp, carrying the faint roar of waves. A few cars idled near the far end, headlights casting pale cones of light on the wet pavement. The figures waiting there stepped forward as we emerged. 3 more respected names in our world. Men who had received my earlier message and come to see how this would end. They had no love for me or for Luca. They had respect for rules. That was enough. My men laid the dead assassin on the ground where everyone could see the colors of his jacket, the tattoo at his throat that matched Luca's crew. I shoved Luca forward so he tripped and landed on his knees beside the body. This is what he sent into my restaurant, I said, armed during a house game, climbing the stairs to the balcony with a gun in his hand. One of the older bosses squinted at the corpse, then at Luca. Is it true? He asked. Luca tried for indignation. You're going to take his word over mine? We already heard your words, another man said. Recorded. About extra insurance. About the boy. I raised the phone again and played the relevant section. The alley filled with his own voice, stripped of room, noise, and pretense. By the time it ended, no one could pretend they had not understood. The rules are simple, I said. No violence inside the house. No cheating. No killing hostages outside the terms. He broke all of them. They did not argue. One by one, they nodded. The house wins by default, the first man said. The boy is his to claim. The docks are his. Luca forfeits. And Luca? I asked. Silence. They looked at each other, then at me, waiting. No one wanted to say the word. No one needed to. I looked down at the man on his knees. He had been dangerous once. Clever. Good with a deck, quicker with a knife. Somewhere along the way, he had started believing he could do anything and walk away from everyone. Behind my eyes, I saw Giada in my office, tears on her cheeks, bravery forcing the truth out. I saw her in the stairwell, holding a gun too big for her hands and pulling the trigger anyway. I saw a boy I had not met yet, tied to a chair because a man like this thought fear was a cheap tool. There are different ways to end this. I could drag it out, make an example that would be whispered about for years. I could hurt him until the alley ran red, until the witnesses turn away. Or I could make it clean, show them that my anger did not make me sloppy, that my line between business and chaos still held. Giotto would hear about this night. So would Kofi. I knew exactly what version of myself I wanted them to carry in their heads. Not soft, not forgivable, but controlled. Someone who did what had to be done and no more. I drew my gun and stepped close enough to look Luca in the eye. You thought you could use a waitress, I said. You thought you could make her kill for you. You forgot that anyone who works under my roof belongs under my protection. He opened his mouth to spit some last insult. I did not give him the chance. One shot, center of the forehead. He dropped backward onto the pavement, eyes still open, surprise frozen there. The sound bounced off the alley walls and faded into the sea wind. No one flinched. One of the older bosses nodded, satisfied. It is done, he said. His territory is yours by right. His debts are now your choice. My choice, I repeated. And the family he targeted owes nothing. Any man who says different will answer to me. There were no objections. I holstered the gun and turned away from the bodies. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Nico's name flashed on the screen. Yes, I said. We have him. Nico answered, breaths coming a little fast. Kofi is alive. Bruised, scared, but nothing broken. We're bringing him to the restaurant now. For the first time that night, some of the tension in my chest unclenched. Good, I said. I will meet you at the back door. I ended the call and looked back at the group in the alley. You have what you came to see, I told the witnesses. Spread the story however you like, but keep the facts straight. Luca cheated. The house game ended in my favor. Anyone who touches the girl or her family now is marking themselves for the same fate. They nodded. No one argued. Men who survive long in this life know when a line has been carved into the concrete. I walked back toward the restaurant, the glow from the back door spilling out onto the wet ground. Through the small window beside it, I could see a shadow moving in the corridor. Giada, standing because sitting was no longer enough, waiting for an answer about her brother and about what kind of man I truly was. As I reached for the handle, one thought settled in my mind with a finality I could not shake. I had built La Serena to be neutral ground, a shield for my business and my people. Tonight, because one waitress cried in my office and chose to trust me with her fear, that shield had shifted. Whatever came next, my life was no longer just mine. The office looked different when I stepped back inside, though nothing in it had changed. Same worn leather chair, same humming mini fridge, same stack of invoices under the paperweight. Yet everything felt heavier, louder, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I lowered myself into the chair slowly, the one where I had once tried to disappear into silence. My hands trembled in my lap, fingers twitching like they still remembered the feel of the trigger. A faint buzz echoed in my ears, the ghost of the gunshot that refused to fade. Rocco shut the door behind us and crossed the room with steady steps. For a moment, he only looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he crouched down, just like the first night he found me here, and rested a warm hand against my knee. "You saved my life," he said. The words landed harder than any bullet would have. I blinked at him, tears gathering again, even though I thought I had none left. "I shot someone," I whispered. "I killed him, Rocco." "You stopped a man who came here to murder me," he corrected gently. "That is called self-defense in my world. And in yours, it is called saving your brother." He reached up, brushing his thumb beneath my cheekbone. "Giada, you did not choose violence. You chose survival. You chose family. Do not twist that into something ugly." I swallowed, throat tight. For the first time since the night began, I felt the faintest thread of air reach my lungs. A knock echoed from the hallway. Rocco rose in one smooth motion and cracked the door. Nico stood there, damp from a night air, streaked with grime, breathing harder than usual. Behind him, leaning on one of the guards, was Kofi, my brother, bruised, shaken, but alive. I shot out of the chair and past Rocco before anyone could stop me. Kofi barely had a second to brace before I wrapped him so tightly his breath left him in a sharp grunt. "Hey," he rasped, voice thin but trying to sound like himself. "Careful. My ribs are still attached, I think." I pulled back, cupping his face, my thumbs brushing over the dark marks near his jaw. Someone had hit him, harder than once. I tried not to cry, but failed immediately, tears streaking down before I could stop them. Kofi sighed and rested his forehead against mine. "I'm okay, Gi," he murmured. "I promise." When I finally let him go, I turned back to Rocco. Kofi did too. He stood straighter when he realized who was in the room. "You're..." Kofi said, voice catching on a mix of fear and awe. Rocco nodded. "You went through something you never should have. That ends tonight." Kofi glanced at me, as if asking silently if it was all right to believe him. I gave a small nod, and that seemed to settle something in him. Rocco approached us, stopping a polite distance away. "All debts Luca claimed are finished now," he said. "No one will come for you or your family again. Anyone who tries will answer to me." Kofi stared. "Why? We're nobodies." "You are a family," Rocco said, "and that is enough." My breath hitched. Kofi looked stunned, but his jaw tightened, pride slipping through his raw edges. "Thank you," he managed, "for getting me out." "You can thank Giada," Rocco replied. "She's the reason you are standing here." Kofi looked at me, eyes wide in a way I had not seen since he was a kid. "You did something?" I hesitated. Rocco answered for me. "She did what was necessary," he said, voice firm, leaving no room for shame. Kofi nodded, swallowing hard. Then he leaned against me again, and for a moment we were just two siblings clinging to each other in the middle of a room that smelled like leather and fear and safety. The days afterwards slipped past in a strange blur. La Serena reopened quietly. Whatever rumors existed among staff were soft, muffled things. Half guesses about the closed night, half superstition about the men who had arrived in the dark and left before dawn. No one looked at me differently, though I caught a few lingering glances. Not cruel, not questioning, just cautious, as if the air around me carried an unspoken warning. Rocco called me to his office 2 days later. When I stepped inside, the desk was organized in his usual precise way, and a small key lay in the center. "For you," he said. I stared. "What is this?" "Your key to this office," he replied. "You will need it. You're no longer just serving tables. Giada. From now on, you are floor manager." I blinked. My throat tightened. "Why me?" "Because you earned it with a year of loyalty before anyone threatened your family," he said. "Because you run that dining room better than anyone. And because I trust you." The words slipped into me like warm light through cracks I did not know I had. I picked up the key, feeling the weight of the metal settle into my palm. "I won't let you down." "You never have," he said. Late that night, when the restaurant had emptied and the kitchens were quiet, I found Rocco in the main dining room. He stood near the window, lit by soft golden light, hands in his pockets, posture loosened in a way I rarely saw. I stepped toward him, heart thudding. "Can I talk to you?" I asked. He turned. "Always." I approached slowly, stopping a foot away. "I am scared," I admitted. "Not of you, or your world. I'm scared of what I did and of what it means." His eyes softened. "You stepped into a fire someone else lit. That does not make you the one who burned a room down." "I would do it again," I whispered. "For Kofi. And for you." He exhaled, something old and tired leaving his shoulders. Then he lifted a hand, carefully, as if giving me time to pull back. When I did not, he touched the pendant at my collarbone, his fingers brushing my skin. "You will not stand alone again," he said. "Not because you are trapped, but because you chose to trust me, and I intend to honor that." I leaned into his touch. Just a little. Just enough. His hand slid up, cupping my cheek. I could feel the warmth of him, the steadiness, the promise in the silence between us. He did not kiss me. Not yet. But the moment hovered in the air like something inevitable, waiting only for the right breath. I closed my eyes briefly, letting myself feel it. The quiet. The safety. The man who had turned the world inside out because someone made me cry. Later, when I stood alone in the center of the dining room, I looked around at the tables I'd cleaned 1,000 times, the bar I had polished, the doorway where I had once hidden my shaking hands. I remember the night I broke apart in the office, believing everything was ending. I had not known that everything was beginning. This restaurant had been just a job once, a place where I earned enough to send money home, where I wore a polite smile and ignored the shadows in the corners. Now it felt like the doorway to an entirely different life. A dangerous one, a loyal one, a life where someone terrifying stood between me and anything that tried to hurt me or my family. A life I had chosen. I exhaled slowly. The night his waitress cried in the office should have ruined everything. Instead, it was the night Rocco Barisi chose me, and the rest of the city learned why making his girl cry was the worst mistake anyone could ever make.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.